Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the BlkWmnAnimator, coming back to you with another video. And this is my movie review of the animated, not live action, Lion King 2019. So they started the movie off right with the Baba. Because everybody was saying if they did not start the movie off right, there was going to be some problems. So first, I want to start off with my thoughts about the style, color, and character design. So the realism was cool, but real life has so many muted colors. I felt like the movie looked like my freshman year of college, like earth tones everywhere. And so sometimes if you use all the real colors of wildlife, it could be very muted. Everything was so brown, earth tone. They had the browns, the greens, even the orange of the lion fur was a bit muted. And I felt like there were even some bugs that they used, like the beetle scene and the spiders scene. There are like versions of those animals that have more color that could have provided more liveliness to the scenes. I think they should have either consulted some wildlife photographers or at least looked at their images, because there are people who take pictures of wildlife, but it's much more contrasty and lively looking. Everything was just so blah throughout most of the movie. And so that's something that I didn't like about the style, the realism that they were going for, which they succeeded, but it took away from the movie for me. And then the color palette was not dynamic enough. Additionally, the realism took away from that beginning scene where Scar is trying to eat Zazu. I feel like Zazu's facial expressions and body expressions are very important to make that scene funnier. The voice actor delivered the lines, but the way they shot the scene, it wasn't as funny as it could have been. Also, with Nala's character design, I felt like when you saw close up Simba and Nala, you could distinguish between who was who, but on the long shots, the character design was not distinguishable enough to be able to tell the difference between which one was Simba and which one was Nala. Which, I mean, for the scenes where that happened, it wasn't that important, but I feel like that's a big aspect of character design. And if you look at the original Lion King, you know, Simba was orange, Nala was like a taupe or tan color, and no matter how far or how close you were able to tell who was who. The scene towards the end of the movie where Simba comes back to Pride Rock, I feel like that scene would have been more dynamic if the colors of Pride Rock had been more contrasty in the beginning of the film. Like, you could tell the difference, but I don't think the difference was as jarring as it could have been. Also, they could have done something with the lighting, like it was sunny outside when Simba came back. It could have probably been more clouds in the area. Something to kind of distinguish and make Pride Rock look even worse than they made it look. Like, you could tell there were carcasses and bones everywhere, but because the whole movie is so muted, or most of the movie is so muted, I feel like that scene was not as dynamic as it could have been. And wholly, I feel like the realism in the movie was more important than it being an animated movie. And I think that did the story a disjustice and the voice actors a disjustice. And where was the fruit at the end of Rafiki's staff? That is totally unnecessary, purely for nostalgic purposes. And I'm sure Dr. John Connie probably told them, yeah, we don't need no fruit at the end of the staff. So, but yeah, the staff was intricate though. Next, I'm going to talk about the posing, animation, and scenes. So at the beginning, the bowing scene, I felt like that was kind of lackluster. In the close-ups, you could see there was synchronized bowing with some of the animals, but especially on that last long shot, I felt like whatever animals were still standing upright, they could have all bowed at the same time. Like those last few animals that hadn't bowed in the close-up scenes, they all could have bowed at the same time to make it more of a dynamic scene. But they kind of just did a long shot, and some of the animals were still jumping up and down, and they kind of went to the next scene. And I just like, nah, they should have did that better. Overall, the key poses of the animation were lacking. I'll put up some images of what I'm talking about, but key poses are dynamic poses that show the action of the character. And in animation, you want to try to choose some dynamic and expressive lines of action to exaggerate. And that's kind of the point of using animation, to do things you don't do in live action and that humans don't do. So as you can see, like Tom and Jerry, instead of throwing a punch, you back and then throw a punch. Or when instead of like going back with a bat to hit something, you go back and stretch, and then you hop up and then hit something. So I feel like an example in this movie is if you compare the 2D and 3D scenes of Nala pinning Simba, both as young and old, I feel like the key poses in the 1994 movie kind of show you the power of animation, and then just the selection of foreshadowing, how when she pinned him when they were young, that's a kind of a key moment that you keep in your head, so that when they meet later in the movie, you know, because she pinned him like that it was Nala, and that clicks in Simba's head. But in this movie, he just has to rely on the fact that the only lioness that could possibly pin him is Nala, and so he recognizes that since she's so strong and pins him, that she's probably Nala, which works. But I feel like the dynamic poses kind of pushes it even further. When the line is delivered, "I laugh in the face of danger, ha 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 ha," that's another place where the posing lacked. I feel like it should have been like, whatever they chose to do, "I laugh in the face of danger," but it should have been like a tossed back head, ha 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 ha. Like, that's the point of animation, to have that expressiveness. I did think the Rafiki scene where he was taking the bugs and putting them on the tree, and then the lights that were kind of flashing behind, that was a cool scene. It was different from the one in 1994, but I feel like they did something cool with it. And then the image of Simba came, and I like that scene. For Zazu, I feel like in general, for Zazu, it felt like, you know, when you're listening to, well, people don't do this anymore, but when people used to listen to comedy albums, like either on a record or on the radio, that's how I felt about Zazu. Like, John Oliver is delivering all these awesome lines, there's some great jokes, but without the expressiveness of the face and the body, they kind of fell flat. Like, they were still funny, but the facial expressions and body expressions would take it to the next level and make it like laugh out loud funny. And I just felt like they didn't do a good job with how they animated Zazu. For the reprimanding scene, after Mufasa saves Simba and Nala from the hyenas, I like the shot where Simba puts his paw in Mufasa's paw. I think they did that well. And then when it becomes night towards the end of that scene, I feel like they could have done more to illuminate the characters, whether that's like making fireflies fly to illuminate their faces. I think that was a bit too dark, and they could have used the power of animation to make that scene better. So shout out to Timon's animator, and Pumbaa's animator is in second place, but whoever animated Timon was doing the dang on thing. And then for the Hakuna Matata scene, when Pumbaa was prancing to the music, that's the style that I was waiting for. Like, this is when they introduced Timon and Pumbaa, that's when everything livened up and it became more of an animated movie. Like, for the duet earlier in the movie that Simba and Nala had, it wasn't that impactful because there was no musicality to any dancing or anything. So when you get to Timon and Pumbaa singing Hakuna Matata, they even did better towards the end of that scene with the older Simba, like his face being more expressive, his like a Hakuna Matata. Like, they did better with animating him. So I don't know if there was different animators that animated older Simba, because I'm not sure how they split up the work, if there was like different scenes or did somebody stay with the character throughout the whole movie. But yeah, they did the dang on thing with Timon, and Pumbaa was good, pretty good too. I like the scene where Zazu helped Nala. I feel like the pacing of that scene, the Zazu kind of flying to bring Scar away, was a really good scene. And then a nice emotional ending with either Nala or Simba's mom. I feel like character design again could have helped me distinguish who that was. Maybe I could have be able to tell by the voice acting, but it was just, they just said Nala, so it's kind of hard to know if that was Alfred Woodard or whoever voiced Nala's mom. But that was like a nice kind of scene altogether. Again, going back to Timon and Pumbaa, their scenes were just so much more dynamic. When they had the scene where they were eating the bugs and Pumbaa kind of went to eat the bugs, and then this is the camera and he kind of encapsulate the camera with his mouth. Like, that is what I wanted. Creativity, like different, like not trying to be like live action. Do different things. And I feel like Seth Rogen and Billy Eichner did great job as the voice actors for Timon and Pumbaa. I think Billy Eichner did a really good job. Seth Rogen's inability to sing was a good character thing. I just comparing it to 1994, the fact that Pumbaa's voice was kind of rough, but he still could kind of sing, was cool. But it worked. Seth Rogen did a good job in this movie. I would have liked the initial scene of Simba's hair flying away to be more meaningful. When I saw the hair in the water and that, I think it was a bug that landed on the hair and then kind of immediately flew away. When the hair was in the water, I would have liked to have maybe Nala come to the edge of the bank or that of the river and maybe put her paw down, and then we either pan the camera up to see her face and know that she's kind of close by, or Nala put her paw down and then her face comes down to camera and she takes a drink of water. I felt like that scene was kind of meaningless until Rafiki got another piece of the hair. I think it was a different piece of the hair, and then he's like, "Oh, Simba's still alive." But it was short, but that scene where the bird wife tossed out Simba's hair when the bird husband brought it in, that was hilarious. Cause it's like, guys be trying, and then women just be like, "Nah, like, get that out of here." Like, that's not the material we use for the nest, James. But that was such a quick scene, but I audibly laughed at that. It was so funny. The scene where Nala was chasing Timon and Pumbaa was awesome. The camera work, the shot selection, the facial and body expressions of all the animals was great. The initial scare of the scene that it came out of nowhere, that was lit. And I feel like whoever did that scene and did the Timon and Pumbaa scene should have did the whole movie, like, because that was great. That's what animation is about. The "He lives in you, remember who you are" scene garnered some emotion. I like that even though it was dark, you could see Mufasa in the water when Simba looked down. I wish they would have done a better job with seeing Mufasa in the clouds. Like, you could see they did it with the lightning flashing, and you could see the hints of Mufasa, but I felt like they didn't do what they could have done with the clouds, with the shape of Mufasa. I feel like he should have been more prominent. And then if you fast forward to the end where they kind of paid homage to Mufasa again, I wish they had actually put him in the clouds. Maybe he was there, but they did such a bad job of kind of shaping him. I didn't see him in the clouds at the end if he was there. But if he wasn't there, I wish they would have put him in the clouds towards the end when they kind of, I think they brought his voice in, but I wish they had done better with that scene and the clouds in the "He lives in you" scene. I feel like they needed to linger on the scene of Scar fighting the hyenas a little bit more. Like, more of when they got to the shadow fighting. I feel like they could have kept the camera there a bit longer than they did. And at the end, when Simba takes back over Pride Rock and then he goes to the end of the ledge, they do go to the next scene and it's very flourishing. But I felt like when he went to the end of the ledge, it could have like immediately brightened and became sunny, and then you could have went to the flourishing scene. I just felt like that would have been a more dynamic way to shoot that scene. Now I want to talk about the lip syncing and the voice acting. Basically, the lip syncing was whack. I could tell that in the clip that I saw of Simba singing Hakuna Matata, and that was going to be the reason I was not going to see Lion King. But I felt like I could make a review, so I decided to pay my little $10, $11 and go see Lion King. But the lip syncing was horrible. When they had open mouth parts, that was good, just because I guess the natural way a lion's mouth and a lot of the other animals' mouths are shaped. Like when they did like E sounds, O sounds, like a lot of the open mouth sounds, they did well. But any of the closed mouth sounds, except for Timon and kind of Pumbaa, they didn't do a good job. So if there was something they needed to say with the M, they didn't bring the lips together. It would have looked unnatural, but it's animation, so I feel like it's okay. But again, the realism is what they were going for, even though they talked. But so the lip syncing was just kind of lackluster, because all of the sounds that go back here were good, the like posing of the mouth. But if they came up here like anything that need ooh, if you gotta like purse your lips, anything that went to the front, it was like floaty. So I didn't like the lip syncing. Chiwetel Ejiofor as Scar really delivered. He should definitely do more animated voice acting. This clicked when he was telling the hyenas the plan about killing Mufasa. I realized his voice was really fitting for the character. And John Oliver did a great job as Zazu. And again, like I earlier said, Seth Rogen and Billy Eichner did great as Timon and Pumbaa. I liked Alfre Woodard. She just didn't talk that much. I feel like Donald Glover as the adult Simba, he did a great job. His voice was not overpowering. And even Beyonce, her voice was not annoying, and that it was not overpowering. And what I kind of mean by that, like sometimes a person's voice could be bigger than the character they're playing, so you kind of oh, that's Beyonce, that's Beyonce, that's Beyonce, that's Donald Glover, that's Donald Glover, that's Donald Glover. But I feel like they kind of encapsulated the character so much that you could forget who was voicing it. Of course, James Earl Jones, come on. Oh, the fact that they did not have James Earl Jones say brother before he fell. What? Like, that's the connection. Like, it was still a sad scene, but like when Scar has his paws and he's just like brother in the 1994 version, like you can see, okay, Mufasa erroneously thinks he has a connection to Scar as brothers, and you can just tell Scar does not care that he is his brother. But they just left that out. Like, who does that? But the scene was still good. And something I didn't mention earlier, when Simba goes to Mufasa after dying, I feel like they could have done better with that animation, because when Simba recites the lines like "I didn't know," I feel like they could have like dropped his head down like in a sad pose, like "I didn't know," but they kind of just left him to be just a lion, a baby cub, and just say the line. So that's kind of where the animation was lackluster. But yeah, James Earl Jones, of course. Anybody else? I think the voice actors for the hyenas did an awesome job. Florence Kazumba for the voice of Shenzi. She delivered her lines and was very sinister. It's just that the animation style that they had didn't allow her to be as sinister as she could have came across. And then the little quips and scenes with Keegan-Michael Key as Kamari and then Eric Andre as Azizi, they delivered their lines together. They did their scenes very well, and it just could have been funnier if they did more with the animation. Like, they delivered those scenes and they were funny, but it just kind of fell flat because they didn't have the expressiveness that needed to push the jokes a little bit further. But that scene where he was lying too close to him, that was a funny scene. But overall, I think the voice actors in the movie did a very good job. I guess most of Rafiki's spoken lines were for whoever could understand, because they didn't have no subtitles or anything. I know Dr. John Connie said that he used a mixture of indigenous languages, so I'm not sure if he was using Afrikaans or Isinghosa, but yeah, I don't know what he was saying. Hopefully somebody translates at some point. Why wouldn't you want people to know what he's saying? Wasn't what he's saying important? And he had less speaking lines. When I looked it up, he definitely had less speaking lines and less scenes, which is unfortunate because he was a very dynamic character in the 1994 film. But maybe Dr. John Connie thought some of the original scenes were too stereotypical or something. I haven't confirmed that, but I could see when you're trying to be more authentic that you could remove some things. So my final thoughts, I thought it was an okay movie. Most of my hangups with the movie are not even comparing it to the 1994 movie. A lot of my hangups had come from being an animation professional and an animation lover. And it would have been interesting to see the movie through fresh eyes, just because some of the things that I didn't like about the movie were in comparison to the 1994 version. But just the overall lack of expression in the characters was just a no for me overall. And I can understand why the Rotten Tomatoes rating is kind of low. I'll be doing another video about how I think some of the animation industry is using 3D wrong. And I think this movie is a great example of that. Animation should be used to do things live action can't do. So when you're trying to be as realistic as possible, you're losing some of the magic that animation provides. And I think some of that animation magic could have been used for the night scenes and darker scenes. and should not have been competing with the Battle of Winterfell for the darkest scenes. I feel like in an animation, there is just no excuse for that, because there are so many things you can do where you can alleviate that darkness. And then with it being animation, there's just so many techniques, and I felt like they did not use 3D properly. They used 3D properly for what they wanted to do, but not for what it could be. My least favorite thing about the movie was that the realism got in the way of a fun movie and hindered the execution of the scenes where the voice actors delivered their lines flawlessly. I think this was very apparent for the characters Zazu, Scar, Rafiki, and the hyenas. My favorite thing about the movie was everything Timon and Pumbaa. Whatever animators did that, kudos to you. Y'all did an awesome job. So let me know what you think about The Lion King 2019. Let me know what you think about what I thought. And I would like you to like so I know it's real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to seal the deal, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. I will see you in the next video.